Good morning, YouTube. Ty Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. Yesterday, kind of went to, you know what, because of a number of things. Got home way too late to stream. I was watching the tornado that was ongoing in Texas yesterday while I was at work, whenever I had spare time, but and on the ride back home, but just wasn't. By the time I got home, it was already gone. So unfortunately, we weren't able to stream yesterday. Would have been the third day in a row, but it's fine. We have a weekend forecast coming up here, and we also have some very interesting weather coming up this weekend towards the southeast. We're going to go ahead and get into that then. So for right now, I'm going to update this to make sure we don't have any new changes here. Still low 6 outlook. But this is our slight risk that we have over here towards Florida. This includes the Big Bend. This includes a large portion of the peninsula. And we're even getting towards southern Georgia, too, as well. We're getting very close to Savannah in that slight risk region, but the potential for severe weather even stretches all the way into South Carolina, maybe even Columbia, Charleston as well. So all three hazards are possible with this setup here. Here's the tornado threat. And there could be multiple waves of severe weather, but the hope is if the rain persists with that first wave, maybe it'll limit the second wave overnight, which is probably going to be the one I go live for. But we have that we have to keep an eye on, and then also there's the wind threat and also the hail threat, as the same storm system that caused all the severe weather in Texas heads this way and interacts with some additional Gulf moisture. Also, the kinematics are mildly impressive for this area too. Better than what I saw in Texas, and even then we still got what we got out of that. Then tomorrow, we have a secondary event that happens. First one's going to be towards Florida in the morning hours, and it's going to hang around more towards the southern half of the peninsula. And then eventually we look more towards the mid-Atlantic towards the afternoon hours. You're in a marginal risk if you're in Virginia, further inland towards North and South Carolina, and then the coast of North Carolina, particularly towards Wilmington and Raleigh. We have that slight risk. We have a tornado threat in both areas, wind threat there as well. The hail threat is more marginal than this one. Lapse rates aren't going to be quite as impressive as today. So that's what we have going on, and then really, this closes out the weekend's potential for severe weather. Monday, the severe weather potential drops off here. We have several days where the potential for severe weather is too low, which is nice. But we'll get into that in another forecast. Looking at the country as a whole for the weekend here, a little bit cooler than average for some. Still going to be somewhat warm over the southwestern parts of Texas here. As we can even see, I'm going to make sure I put the time frame in here. This is getting into the late morning here. You can see those temperatures over Florida getting to 87 plus degrees. Cooking over there. It's almost a prime environment for severe weather. By the afternoon, we're starting to see that warm sector even push into other parts of the southeast, even into Georgia. 21Z, which would be about 3 o'clock Eastern, we start to see those first rounds of storms popping off here. There is good potential for severe with that as well, but again, like, that's going to be a key factor as to what happens tonight, how those storms progress. If it rains for an extended period, we could limit the severe threat overnight. If not, this could become a much bigger problem. And another interesting thing that we have here as we continue to look at this forecast is we see the cold air starting to move in from the north here. So it could be a little frigid for the northern states, not too much. So by the afternoon, we're already warming back up. But what this trough is effectively going to do, it's going to create a situation in which we have the potential for a few nighttime storms to fire here with increased potential for even some supercells, some of which could produce tornadoes, maybe even a strong one. But now as we get into Sunday afternoon, here's that warm sector pushing off to the east here again. This is what's going to create our setup for the mid-Atlantic event. Look what happens over here as we progress further into Sunday. Look at the temperatures over towards Texas, where we're getting up to 90s. Even a few hundreds are starting to show up here over towards the southwest. It's going to be very hot over there. And then after that, the trough really starts to dig down south here as we head into Monday. Excuse me. And then we're going to start to see those below average temperatures starting to take over here. And then just as quickly as it warmed up over the southwest, we're back into a little bit of a cool down here. And this is pretty much going to be how we start the month of May here. So let's go ahead and look at the potential precipitation here. And like I said, area to watch particularly, of course, is Florida. Most of the potential for snow is going to be north of the border. We could get some isolated snow showers towards the UP. But outside of that, really not a lot going on there. And even then, with this snow potential here, it's not going to hang around for too long until about Monday afternoon. We'll get into that in another video. Maybe towards the UP and parts of Wisconsin here, we could get some increased snowfall as we head into Monday afternoon, possibly, as that cold air starts to dig more. But I'm also going to look back at Florida here, and we're going to get a little bit more in depth in just a minute with the potential for severe weather. So this is the timing that we have right now. Did not mean to have that sounding. Had to get that sounding off of there, but having trouble showing the timing here. But here's that first wave of storms coming in right in the early afternoon. It's just offshore here. This is about lunchtime. Then as we go towards about 2 to 3 p.m., that's when our first storms start to make their way on shore here. The potential for these storms, the ceiling isn't super high. Again, marginal severe threat, elevated storms, as you can see represented by the helicity here and the sounding on this hordeograph. The sounding here, the hordeographs are mildly impressive, but when these storms are elevated like this, you don't really get a lot of potential to see any sort of tornadic activity. These storms aren't rooted with the surface. They don't tend to get that strong. But as we head later into the afternoon here, this is getting towards about 7 o'clock. The intensity seems to pick up just slightly here. Starting to see those storm relative felicities a little bit closer to the ground here. But the surface is not really set up to where we get anything of major concern as of yet. Still need to keep an eye on this. I may go live around this time. And then after that, about 8, 9 o'clock, this first wave moves out. If this persists if this goes any earlier in the day and clears out, this could be a bigger problem for overnight. But those temperatures do persist to where severe potential is more probable as time goes on. So we get towards 06Z. Here's this next line of storms beginning to develop here. And we could see some embedded action here, as well as a line of thunderstorms starting to fire off, where we could see all hazards in play. I think damaging winds kind of becomes a more favorable threat. Then as we get towards about 7 a.m., we get more storm potential across parts of central and southern Florida Peninsula here. Then, of course, as that low closes in on the mid-Atlantic, we could see some early storms firing in the morning, maybe a little bit of potential storms in the afternoon. But by the evening hours, that cold air is starting to rush in, and it will stabilize the atmosphere. So now that we know that, let's go ahead and actually hone in on Florida a little bit here. So what we're looking at right now is the convective available potential energy, or CAPE. Very familiar to a lot of us that are weather nerds here. What CAPE ends up doing is we end up seeing some increased values as we get into the evening hours here. Already by 2 o'clock, we're getting up to about 3,000 joules per kilogram. Nasty environment for storms. And here we go. Look at the value here. We're getting up to about 4,500 joules plus. This one has a setup that leans a little bit more towards tornadic development, as indicated by the hordeograph and by the hazard type. Plenty of matches for supercells. Also hail. We've had a lot of historic hail over this region here too. The STP over this area is pretty impressive. It's a 3, We could see some potentially higher values as we go later into the evening here. So as we move that forward, here comes the second round. This is towards 06Z, so this is about 3 in the morning possibly. Still up to about 2,000 joules per kilogram. We start to favor this area more to the south a bit more. And look at that. PDS tornado here. This is where things are kind of really getting alarming. I want to kind of be live more for this secondary setup here, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to or not. I'm going to try. I'm really going to try, depending on how things develop here. I may take a brief break from the first stream, depending on how things unfold. And then I'll try and see if I can wake up early and do this. Because I want to make up for yesterday in particular. I'm really frustrated about that, in case you can't tell. But that's pretty much the energy that's going to be available with the atmosphere. I downloaded that sounding so I can share that on my Discord. Also, that's a good segue for you guys to join it. And then as time goes on here, as the storm system moves off, so does that available potential energy. And as a result, the severe weather threat will end. There is something interesting to note here. There is a little bit of a capping inversion, which could inhibit storm development. I don't think it will be enough this time to stop it. There is a little bit of a cap that tries to develop over this region, but what happens by the time we get to about 20Z, cap's gone. So storms are going to fire here, and then we'll see it try to re-emerge over this region, but by 06Z, guess what? It's gone again. Especially those areas to the south are going to be the ones we need to watch a little closer here. And then, of course, after the storm system moves out, we get more stable air, caps in place, no more storms. One other thing to look at here, and this is what I'm kind of really interested in looking at right now, is the significant tornado parameter here. You can see those higher values over here towards this region, but of course that's over open water. We're not going to be so concerned about that, but watch what happens as we go from 21, 22Z, where things aren't that impressive, to 06Z. Look at that. 05, 06, boom, 07. Look at that. Look at those values. 4s, maybe some 5s and 6s in there even. Look at that. Boom. SIGTOR is pretty high right here, 6.5. Those are very rare numbers for Florida. Very alarming numbers at that. So big time problems there, but we also have to remember that this does persist into the overnight hours, even into the early morning hours. So I may just do one stream depending on how things go. And then I don't know. It's kind of hard to choose. I'm definitely going to try to do overnight at the very least. So the next thing to look at here is going to be over towards this region here in the mid-Atlantic. It's going to be a long evening for me, for sure. So if you join in, try to donate if you can, because I definitely, or just chat, please, because I'm going to need all the energy I can get from you guys. That being said, enough rambling from that. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the Cape that we could see early in the day here. This is by the early morning hours here. The Cape's a little bit more limited. We still get past that 1,000 joule mark, which is sufficient for severe weather. And with that, boom, look at that. Tornado sounding. Again, low-level hordeograph looks good. Storm relative velocities are impressive. This is quite a tornadic setup for this region. Not one that you see pretty often. It's pretty odd, but nonetheless, it's interesting. Probably going to turn into a 30-minute video because I'm nerding out over this, literally. But that's what the Cape looks like. Capping inversion really isn't going to be there tomorrow, so there's not going to be anything that really inhibits this too much, other than maybe a lack of daytime heating. Beyond that, we also have the significant tornado parameter to look at. And from what I can see here, the values don't get super high Well, actually, yes, they do. I'm almost scared to see what this brings. Yep, another Tor. Another Tor as a hazard type. Not quite as high on the STP as what I was seeing yesterday from some of my buddies on Discord here. Like I said, go follow that Discord. You will see a lot of insightful stuff, especially if you're a weather nerd. That being said here, pretty impressive lapse rates with this too. I think the hail threat could be a little bit more promoted on this than I thought than what is being shown by the SPC right now. Like I said, some upgrades could be possible. So that being said, really interesting stuff going on right now. Yesterday there was a little bit of discrepancy between this model and the NAM, the HRRR, which I'm now looking at. So we'll go ahead and take a quick look at that as well. We'll just put that at high pace. Whereas the NAM was always kind of aggressive with this setup, the HRRR was a little bit more doubtful. But I'm starting to see some correlation between the two, albeit not quite as much. The Cape values with this are not quite the same. I still see potential for tornadoes with this, but not quite as intense. But still, the fact that they're both showing that is definitely a pretty notable signal. Still at 80 degrees by this time. Early morning. Good grief. Then there's not much of a capping inversion, whereas yesterday there kind of was. So I think these two might be trending towards a point of agreement here. And also another interesting thing to note is these storms are set to fire later in the afternoon on Sun. Is like earlier in the morning on Sunday, or early morning versus overnight. Then looking at the cap inversion here, this is where the key discrepancy came in, and it looks like the cap still ends up breaking with this, albeit a little bit later. The timing of this is just a bit later in general. And then the same thing with the morning setup. The timing just seems to still be different. Nonetheless, it's something to keep extra close eye on here. So next thing to look at, of course, is the significant tornado parameter, STP. So I'm getting the time frame back in here, and we're going to 20Z, 22Z. Towards the eastern side of Florida is where the tornado potential seems to be a little higher, but still not quite as aggressive as the NAM 3 kilometer here. Audiographs are impressive all the same, though. So, like I said, a lot of moving parts here. And then with this setup, there's still some good parameters over here, especially towards the west coast of Florida, where we could see some 4s and some 5s. This looks very impressive right here. Not quite a significant tornado threat, but it's definitely it's definitely about as impressive as the NAM, excuse me. And then of course we'll go ahead and switch over to the Mid-Atlantic really fast. Oops. So we're back on to the Mid-Atlantic here, looking at the Cape. It's a pretty similar deal. Slightly weaker Cape values in comparison to the NAM, but still enough to where we could have some problems here. It's a little bit further inland too, which I find interesting as well. This leans more towards a linear type setup, which isn't disagreeable considering the storm system's proximity to the low. But outside of that, not really a whole lot going there. Not quite as impressive as the NAM here. It'll be interesting to see which result will be close. Well, how the outcome will be and which model this outcome will trend more towards. Personally, I lean a little closer towards the NAM. But it'd be nice if this outcome would occur, because this would limit the tornado threat just slightly. Still can get tornadoes within that main line though too, so you shouldn't let your guard down. I will say that as well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and shift over to the STP for this one. And I've still been seeing crazy soundings even with the HRRR on that one as of yesterday, but this morning will be really interesting. Here we are looking into the early morning hours, getting up to about a 3 here. Semi-discrete supercell here. Lower significant tornado parameter numbers, surprisingly, even though I just clicked on an area that was a 3, but okay. Nonetheless, still an area that we have to watch really closely here. So 2.7. Let's try that again. Make sure I haven't. Yeah, that's the same sounding. I don't know why I did that. That being said, though, once this clears out, though, we're pretty much done. It's about a 20-minute video I've probably done here at least. Hopefully enjoyed my ramblings. I love this stuff in a way. I don't like what it does to people. Hence why we go live and try to help spread the word and the warnings. That being said, if you enjoyed the content, you know what to do. Whether you're new or you've been here a while, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, join our Discord. Of course, share this video, especially if you know anyone in Florida today. And then, of course, comments are always welcome. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. That being said, though, this has been Tyre Metalhead Weatherman. I'm going to hop off here and try to gear up for this stream, whichever time it may be. Until then, you guys take care and have a good rest of your day. I will see you later.